Hello and welcome back to the Chargers Check-In. My name is Cecilia, here to cover everything Chargers, and here we are in Week 9. The Chargers finally have some good news off of this injury report. The Titans actually have some bad news off of this injury report, so this might be the first time the Chargers actually have a health advantage all year. We're going to get into all that, as well as some roster moves on the Chargers side, and the state of the Tennessee Titans this week and in general, and how the Chargers match up with them. So let's start with the injury reports. So we're going to start on the Titans side. I'll keep it relatively brief, but they are not in a great situation. They actually have the same number of people on their injury report as the Chargers do. It might be the first time that has happened this season. They are likely to be without Calvin Ridley, Chigo Okonkwo, Jeffrey Simmons, Arden Key, and Xavier Woods. Now, Jeffrey Simmons is the biggest deal of all those people. Calvin Ridley, he's important too, but Jeffrey Simmons, he's one of those guys on the line that is an absolute game record just by himself, both in the run game and the pass game, which is very impressive from his position. And without him, I am not as afraid of the Chargers' interior offensive line situation. Him matched up against Bozeman, or, even against Becton, it makes me nervous. It's not guaranteed that he's out at this point, but he didn't practice today, and usually, if someone doesn't practice on Thursday, it's usually a good indication that they're not going to play. Being without Ridley and Okonkwo, that is a big deal. That's kind of their number 1 and 2 wide receiver. Obviously, that is a tight end, but functionally, in terms of the amount of yards, he kind of is their wide receiver too. And Arden Key, Xavier Woods, just a little weaker on the defensive side. We'll see how big of a deal that ends up being. We'll have to keep an eye out for who ends up playing. This might be the first time that the Chargers are healthier than an opponent. Like I said, I don't know if this represents as much of a disadvantage as being without, when you consider Najee Harris and Rashawn Slater, and now they're down Tarheeb and Tony Jefferson. We'll get into all that. It's nice to see, the Chargers last week, they faced the Vikings, who have a lot of similar issues to what the Chargers had earlier this year. And now the Chargers are going against the Titans, who have the injury issues that the Chargers have had. It is nice for these things to finally go in favor of the Chargers for once. Now, on to the Chargers. They practiced Tuesday, Wednesday, and Thursday this week rather than practicing Wednesday, Thursday, Friday. The idea being, let's get people more rested after a mini bye week, get people back in the building sooner, and allow them to sort of have 2 Saturdays of rest effectively. That's what Jim Harbaugh said anyway. The Chargers also announced that they're bringing back the Navy uniforms later this year against the Texans. That game's not till December, but that has been a really big hit, and from what I've heard, the feedback that I've gotten from you guys, it's not just the uniforms, it's also what they do at the stadium. They have that great, retro graphics with the 8-bit and everything that apparently got people really hyped. I know SoFi would be really cool place to be in December when they bring it back. But onto the Chargers injury report. Tarheeb still, as we talked about, he suffered an MCL sprain. He was not put on IR. So while he could be out for up to 4 weeks, it seems like it is possible that he's back before then. And I think with the bye week somewhat coming up, the Chargers probably didn't feel like they needed to put him on IR, that's good news, because if they felt like it was going to be more than 4 weeks, then they probably would have put him on IR. It seems that the next man up in this situation is going to be Nico Reed. Apparently, that's what Jesse Minter said, that it's not going to be Jaw Taylor, although he represents some depth there as well, though he was kind of on the injury report. It looks like he'll be good to play, but Nico Reed is the 100% guy. So it'll be interesting to see how that works out. Derwin James notably said that he feels fresh, he expects to play. He couldn't put much weight on his foot during the Vikings game, and it made him really nervous, which is why he was in that walking boot. But apparently he's back and good to go. Will Dissly has been inactive for a few games. Harbaugh said that was just because they felt like their other tight ends made more sense with their game plan. He was listed as limited today, and he did individual drills off to the side and then didn't practice with the team. Similar with Mekhi Becton, he has that knee issue, and he did individual drills, and then he went inside the facility during the team drills. So not a good sign, though he probably is trending toward playing. He might be on a snap count. It might be he'll play until he can't. We'll see. But Jamari Sawyer is limited, so Foster Sorrell could very well be the right guard on Sunday, which is not a good situation. But like I said, if Jeffrey Simmons isn't out there, you feel a little bit better about it. And there is a chance that Sawyer's able to get back out there. Hassan Haskins is still not practicing. That's concerning, but is what it is. The Chargers did open up the window for both cornerback Dean Leonard to return and for long snapper Josh Harris. That could be a really big deal. I'm not sure how closely you guys are following the Rick Lovato thing, but, he's been filling in at long snapper, and he's had quite a few bad snaps that luckily J.K. Scott has always been able to grab them, but I do think he contributed to why Cam Dicker missed a kick last week. I think, the snap wasn't what he expected. The timing was a little bit off, and because of that, he wasn't able to adjust his kick the way he normally would. It's not guaranteed that Josh Harris comes back this week, but it is good news that he is practicing, even if in a limited fashion again. Kendall Williamson seems to be on his way back. Not sure what that situation is. He's a safety. Ladd McConkey is listed as limited, but there's no indication that he won't play, as far as I can tell. Cam Hart is out with an illness. He's probably completely fine. Usually, with illness, you just want to play it safe. On to some roster moves real quick. The Chargers signed Marcus Williams. He's the former Ravens safety. He's had a fair number of interceptions and pass breakups throughout his career. I think he makes sense as a depth guy just with the injuries out there. Tony Jefferson didn't practice, and so Derwin James, he probably feels like he has to play. Hopefully that's not a big re-injury risk. But with Marcus Williams there, you have a little bit more depth. They also signed defensive lineman Kyle Pecco. He's a veteran. He's played on several teams. Again, just represents more depth. And to make room for these guys, they released wide receiver Luke Grimm and running back Nyheim Hines from the practice squad. I'm sure you guys remember that Hines was the guy who ran back that kick in the last drive to get the Chargers into good field position. Not last game, but the game before that. So it is a little bit surprising to me that they are all right getting rid of him, but at the same time, you have Darius Davis back, and, they clearly believe in him, even though he hasn't been great. But I wouldn't be surprised if they elevate some of these practice squad guys going into this weekend. Now, let's move on to the state of the Titans, because they are famously not in a very good position. So they're 1-7, coming off of a brutal loss to the Colts. I don't even hold that against them. The Colts are a really good team. So they fired Brian Callahan 6 games into his second year as head coach. And, before Brian Callahan, you had Mike Vrabel, who, he's over at the Patriots, and they're doing great. And, he's known as a great coach, but he had some conflicts with the owner, and Vrabel does, have a hard time playing well with owners, but at the same time, he was a great coach, and he was clearly very desirable around the league, so it does surprise me that they ended up firing him. And now they've fired Brian Callahan, and, anytime coaches are fired that quickly, it can be harder for them to fill that position, just because if you're a coordinator and you're looking at the Titans, you're going, well, if I don't turn this thing around in 1 year, then I might get fired. It doesn't make it very desirable. So what they've done in the meantime is they've elevated Coach Mike McCoy, who was on their staff, into the interim head coach. Chargers fans should know that name. He was the head coach from 2013 to 2016. He did have one good year, but there were some pretty awful times at that point. He wasn't exactly a player's coach, and I'm surprised at this choice from the Titans to elevate him. The Titans are likely sellers at the deadline. I say likely, but really we know that they are. They already traded cornerback Roger McCreary and a conditional 6th-round pick for a 5th-round pick to the Rams. Not that that's like a big needle-moving trade or anything, just shows that they're already looking at trades. I wouldn't be surprised if between when I'm talking about this now and when I post this or when you watch this, there's more trade news. The Chargers might be interested in a few of their players. They have had great success getting players from the Titans and turning them into more than they were on Tennessee before. It's worth noting everyone is playing worse on Tennessee because Tennessee is a really bad team. Even good players are going to play a little bit worse, just because if everyone around you is a little bit worse, you have a lot less to work with. Kevin Zeitler, he's one of the more desirable candidates because he's an interior offensive lineman. He's older, he's a veteran. A lot of teams have had beat writers speculate, oh, maybe we'll go and get Zeitler, because it's not an exciting trade for anyone, but it is so hard to find guards on the market that he seems desirable. I've seen speculation that he might go to Seattle, so I don't think the Chargers would be without competition there, but I do think that's a name that Chargers fans might be interested in. Tony Pollard could end up being a good fit. He's their veteran running back. He has explosive potential. He could end up being a good complementary piece where Najee Harris had been with Amarian Hampton, as well as filling in for him while Hampton's injured. For the Chargers to make a trade, they would have to restructure some contracts. I've talked about how they don't have much cap space right now. I think they have the second least in the league. So they would have to make some moves in order to make this happen, but I think that's something that they can get done. But essentially, the Titans are the ultimate sellers at the deadline. There are no good vibes happening there. I think a lot of these players would be happy to get out. So that's where the Titans are. Let's talk a bit about their offense. As you guys know, last year they used the number 1 overall pick to draft Cam Ward. Cam Ward is very talented. It absolutely makes sense that he was the number 1 pick in the draft, that he was the number 1 quarterback taken. I think he's a really talented player. He's had some great flashes. He had a great touchdown pass against the Patriots to Shamir DK, who is also a recent draft pick for them. This Titans offense passes 65% of the time, but they are 5th to last in passing yards per game. So they pass all the time, but they are not doing it successfully. But I think because so often they're playing from behind, they have no choice but to pass, even if they would prefer to run because they tend to get down quickly. Cam Ward has only 5 touchdowns on the year. For context, Justin Herbert has 16 touchdowns with only 1 more interception than Ward has. And, Justin Herbert obviously has had way more attempts because his defense has been more successful. Not that they've been great, but they've been better than the Titans has. And, when you drop back all the time, you expect, you're going to get a fair amount of interceptions, but going with that, you're going to get a fair amount of touchdowns. And Cam Ward hasn't been able to get that done. He's having a hard time connecting with his receivers. And, he's taken 34 sacks, which is the most in the league. And I think the next person up is at 28. It's not super close. Part of that is his awareness, but a lot of that is his offensive line is pretty weak. They've had some injuries, and a lot of defenses are taking advantage of them and just getting after him. And it takes time for a rookie quarterback to adjust to the speed of the NFL. And, the timing of when you step up in the pocket is absolutely a part of that. So we'll get into how the Chargers can take advantage of that. But they're dead last in EPA per play and EPA per rush. They're second to last in per pass. So this offense is struggling and they don't have a strong point. So in terms of their receiver core, Shamir DK, Elikai O'Manor, Van Jefferson, they make up the receiving core while Calvin Ridley is hurt. Tight end Chigo Okonkwo, he's effectively wide receiver too in terms of how he's used and how frequently he's used, but he might not play either, so they may be down their number 1 and number 2 pass catchers. So I would expect Cam Ward to look to Elikai O'Manor. He was the rookie 4th round pick out of Stanford. I thought he could have been taken sooner. I had a 3rd round grade on him. I think he does a great job finding soft spots in zone coverage, despite, I would say, average athleticism for the NFL. He's a good route runner, and similarly, their rookie tight end, Gunnar Helm, he's been improving a lot. He was also taken in the 4th round out of Texas. I thought he should have been taken higher too. He was one of those guys I was projecting to the Chargers because I thought the Chargers would be willing to give, maybe a 3rd round pick, or if he was available, where he was in the 4th round. But they end up taking him, and he looks pretty good. I would be surprised if he doesn't see some action this week. So if Derwin James is there, he might have an opportunity to give Gunnar Helm a nice welcome to the NFL, as Derwin James often does. The running back, Tony Pollard, he gets pretty solid yards after contact. He's a guy who runs hard. He runs really angry, and he always fights for yards. He's not afraid of running into the contact. He's got explosive play potential, which is a little bit worrying because the Chargers haven't been at their best when it comes to tackling and stopping explosive plays, both in the run and the pass game. So that's something to think about, but they are still the 7th worst in the rush yards per game category. And that's not a Tony Pollard stat. That is they're always playing from behind stat. And so they have to pass 65% of the time. That's just the reality. That doesn't mean that they pass 65% of the time in the first quarter, but it just means that they're not often in a position to run the way that they want to, and the way that they know that Tony Pollard could. On to the defense. The defense has a bit of an explosive play problem, like the Chargers. Jeffrey Simmons is a fantastic player, but he's out this week with a hamstring injury. At least he is most likely out this week. But their defensive line has had some flashes. They really got after Geno Smith, and the Raiders' weak offensive line gave them opportunity. It led to an interception, but on average, they are struggling to get after the quarterback. So they've had their flashes, but that performance could go either way. It also depends on the health of the Chargers' offensive line. They definitely have a missed tackle problem. They have 57 missed tackles tackles, which is the 6th worst in the league. That's not where you want to be, especially, the way Kamani Vidal's been running. The Chargers could turn that into a problem for the Titans. They have the 5th most rushing yards allowed in the NFL. They're slightly below average in pass yards allowed, but opponents are often playing with a lead and don't want to pass the ball, and so they only pass in obvious situations and are otherwise running. In terms of special teams, I think Shamir Dike has some explosive return potential. He got a touchdown versus the Cardinals, and the Chargers special teams has struggled to make tackles. That is, one of the reasons that we didn't want to see Caleb Murphy go the way he had, but, Thule's going to be out there and he might have to make some plays, so we'll see how that goes. Their kicker, Joey Sly, he struggled early in the season. He's not as reliable as a Cameron Dicker is, although not many are, so that's something to look out for. But I think the overall takeaway from the state of the Titans is that they have the worst score differential in the NFL. That just means the difference between their score and their opponent's score, and they allow 28.8 points per game. That's really bad. A good defense, a top 10 defense allows probably 19 or 20 points a game, and they're allowing over a touchdown more than that. The Chargers definitely are projected to win this game. It is not projected to be close, so let's talk about how the Chargers can go about beating the Titans. First of all, I think protecting Herbert with extra blockers is still important. They need to respect the pass rush, even if it isn't, a top 10 unit. I just think that, the main thing that they could lose going into every game is Herbert's health with how the offensive line has been. While Jim Harbaugh has had some really good things to say about Bobby Hart, he said, he's not sure if Pipkins will play. He was being very ambiguous as to who would play right tackle. Whoever it is, they're not Joe Alt there. And so we need to keep that chip help on that side. We need the pass protection to stay up from Kamani Vidal and the running backs. They can't give up on that just because the Titans have a weaker defensive front. They just can't. They can't afford to do that. Got to keep Herbert healthy. And the other thing is they need to get an early lead so that they can run the ball. Because if they're running the ball, that means they're playing to their strength and the Titans' weakness. Let Kamani keep the momentum, see if he can develop as much as possible with Amari and Hampton out. Harbaugh said that Vidal is playing like a number 1 running back, not just on our team, but in the league. I wouldn't say that he's, up there with Jonathan Taylor, but I would say that he probably is a top 10 running back in the league right now. And I think they need to let him continue that performance because I promise you he has developed more in the last few months than he did all of last season because he's getting playing time. So I think this is a really big deal for his development. I think if he did what he did against the Vikings, he can absolutely do it against this weak Tennessee defense. I think the Chargers offense is so much better than the Titans offense that they should be able to run the time of possession game. It shouldn't be close, but to do that, they need to get a lead early. And they've done a better job this year of getting touchdowns on their opening drives. I think this is another opportunity to get that done. Other than that, in the first half, got to get after Cam Ward aggressively. The Titans are below average in pass blocking. I think they can keep Odafe Owe's momentum going, and I think, Thule, Mack, and Owe have done a really good job getting after the quarterback, collapsing pockets, teeing up Justin Aboigbe to get sacks. I think this defensive line may end up having a really big game, and I think bringing extra guys for pressures early on can throw Cam Ward off enough that, again, it could contribute to an early lead. And the thing I say pretty much every week that the Chargers need to do is to clean up the penalties. That they have looked worse than they do right now, but they need to get a lot better. They're averaging 7.5 penalties per game. That has to go down before December. You can't go into playoff games averaging 7.5 penalties. Not because that's so terrible, but because a lot of these penalties are really preventable. It's false starts, illegal formation. It's the kind of thing that gives opposing defenses just a little bit of an edge, gives their special teams just a little bit of an edge. And when you're facing worse competition, mistakes like these are how upsets happen. So that's definitely going to be something I'm looking for. But this is an opportunity for a really decisive win for the Chargers. I think anything less than a decisive win would be a big disappointment. Now, it may sound to you like I'm disrespecting the Titans. Obviously the Titans are a team full of professional athletes. Anything could happen. Here's the thing. If the Chargers lose to the Titans this week, if Justin Herbert goes down and something crazy happens, sure, I'll give you that. But if they just play a normal game and the Chargers lose, I don't know what to tell you. Maybe I'll be out on the Chargers this year. I don't know. I don't think that you can consider yourself a playoff contender, even on the bubble of being a playoff contender, and lose to a team that is 1-7. I don't think that's something the Chargers can do. So with all that being said, my score prediction for this game is going to be a Chargers win, 30-17. Again, this needs to be a decisive win. The Chargers should score more points than your average team does against the Titans. And, they need to show that Kamani Vidal is legit, that, Herbert runs this offense and their defensive line can eat against weaker offensive lines. If you're thinking of skipping this game, I really recommend that you don't, because Keenan Allen is going to surpass Antonio Gates' reception record. I think that's a really big deal. It's a historic moment for the Chargers organization. And like I said in my last video, we really don't know how much longer Keenan Allen's going to be wearing a Chargers jersey. This year could be it. Next year could be it. We're not sure. So definitely enjoy that while you can. And on top of that, I recommend that if you're a super fan, which if you're watching my channel, you are, we're talking about pass blocking efficiency and stuff. You're definitely into this. Go watch the Chargers mini movie. I'm sure a lot of you have, but I think it does a really good job of showing the strengths of guys like Trey Harris and Kamani Vidal, these younger guys, and also you look at the film of Kamani Vidal, that camera that they show and how close up it is, you really get a sense of how hard he runs and how intelligently he runs. You can see his eyes, they're looking forward, they're glancing back and forth, and he is so determined to properly read the defense and find the best possible holes and to keep his legs going through contact. I thought that was really impressive. And of course, the Chargers media, they always do a fantastic job with the production and editing on those projects. Dream job producing or editing for the Chargers media team right there. So that's going to do it for me. My name is Cecilia. Please like and subscribe if you've liked what you've seen here. I'll see you guys again next week for a recap of the Chargers, hopefully with a decisive win over the Titans. Thanks so much for being here. I'll see you guys next time.